Hello and welcome to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Powell. For today's episode, we'll be listening to the 1975 album entitled 4 Centuries of Italian Guitar. Ernesto Bitetti will be playing for us. This is on the Turnabout Vox label 34680. Composers featured are Cilasote, Milano, Roncalli, Giuliani, Paganini, Castelnuovo, Tedesco, and Petrassi. We'll be right back. And we're back on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. Thanks for listening. Take a minute and let us know where you're listening from. You can head to the hub that I use for this podcast at instagram.com/powellguitar. Send a message. Say, hey, I'm listening from wherever you're listening from and on what platform. I'm really interested to know that sort of thing, and I'd love to hear it that way. I read these reports and I see that people are listening in all sorts of the corners of the world, but it would be very cool to hear from people in that organic sort of way on Instagram. I can be reached at some other places too, and I will include that on the flip side when we flip to side 2. This record is pretty interesting because it really spans quite a long period of time, 4 centuries to be exact, as the record jacket says, of the Italian classical guitar. And I think it's just really, really cool because we get to hear the 6 lute pieces of the Renaissance transcribed by Oscar Cilasote, the Italian musicologist. And so anybody who has studied classical guitar for any sort of period of time has heard these pieces, has played these pieces, has studied, and I'm sure has performed these pieces. But I'm excited to share this with an audience that maybe you're not actually a classical guitar player. Maybe you just enjoy the music. And so this music is for you too. It's not just for us classical guitar nerds, as it were. The 6 pieces for lute, the 6 lute pieces of the Renaissance, as many of us know them, are sort of a staple of the intermediate repertoire, as it were. They're absolutely gorgeous pieces, and they're all beautiful. And here is the listing in the order that they are in this edition. We have the Vague Bellezze, Biancofiore, Danza, Gagliarda, Se io m'accorgo, and Saltarello. And I have butchered some of those pronunciations. My Italian is not as best as it could be. I want to draw some attention to the last piece, the Saltarello, the dance. You'll hear a nice triple meter, bum, 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 bum. And I want to tell a very quick story because that Saltarello is actually by somebody who the general person may not know who this person, but we all know who the astronomer Galileo was. Well, the Saltarello that we're going to hear in this episode here, the 6th track on this was written by Galileo's father, and you may or may not know that Vincenzo Galilei was a very important person with regard to the development of opera and musical theater as we know it today. How did we get there? Well, it's sort of a story, and I think I will let you sort of look that sort of thing up. All I will say is he was part of an organization called the Camerata. So again, the composer's name of the last number of the 6 pieces of the Renaissance, Vincenzo Galilei, and he was part of an organization called the Camerata. I have a fun story about that. He was also an astronomer, and I remember one time I was playing an event here in Des Moines at the Drake Observatory, and we performed some pieces, and I just sort of flippantly picked this piece, and I noticed a reaction from a whole bunch of the members of the people in the audience. There was probably about 30 people in the audience. It wasn't a great big show, but in any case, when you start seeing 3 or 4 people buzzing out of a crowd of 30, it's sort of remarkable. You can see that. And when I had announced the piece and who it was, the people were just sort of aghast because there was a painting of the actual composer Vincenzo Galilei behind me, and I was not aware of that. It was really kind of a unique moment, and I enjoyed that a lot. So I hope you enjoyed those 6 lute pieces of the Renaissance, and I hope you enjoy that story. The second track on first side by Francisca di Milano, a Ricercare, number 16 and 28. my goodness, that makes me think right away. I would like to hear the rest of the Ricercare. Ricercare are a somewhat quasi-improvisational sounding piece of the late Renaissance, early Baroque. They're sort of an interesting thing because it's a form that changes over time. Ricercares don't stay the same. The early ones and late ones are a little bit different, not with this particular composer, but just in general. So enjoy those two tracks. Then we have Ludovico Roncalli, Prelude, Sarabande, and Gigue. That's a fun piece, and I enjoy hearing this. And we round out side one with the absolute masterpiece by Mauro Giuliani, the Grand Overture, Opus 61. I hope you enjoy side one, and we will get to side two after we hear some great music. Enjoy. Well, I really hope you enjoyed side one of that recording. I think that Ernesto Bitetti plays very well. I like his tone. I like his feel. You can really sort of feel the true passion and spirit behind the artist playing all the notes. And my goodness, the compositions are beautiful as well. Side one is definitely my favorite of the two on this one. As we flip over, we look at a piece of Paganini, Niccolò Paganini. Niccolò Paganini is most well known, of course, as the violinist, and you may or may not know that Niccolò Paganini was sort of in his day, he was the violinist and played all over the place, and to much great critical acclaim. And he would perform, and he had this whole shtick where he would sharpen the end of his violin bow, and he would purposely gouge one of the strings as he's playing on his violin and snap a string clear down until he only had one string left, and then how, my goodness, would he be able to finish this piece? And with his dazzling virtuosic technique, would finish the piece with only one string and with pieces of string laying around in the violin. It's also my understanding that he sort of played up the notion that, and sort of, I'll back up here, when people are really good at what they do, sort of fiendishly good at what they do, in olden times especially, and now still, people think that something's up with that, How could that person be so good at their craft? And so there were people that thought that Niccolò Paganini was in league with the devil because of his talent on the violin. And of course, Niccolò Paganini really played up on that, and he would wear cloaks and things like that and really have some of that sort of dazzling mystique with his violin playing. But in any case, you may have known that about Paganini already, and you may not have known that Paganini played the guitar. Well, indeed he did, and there's actually a pretty nice volume of work on the guitar by Paganini. Now, as far as guitar music goes, I think that it's probably not quite as exciting as you might think. These are nothing like the caprices for the violin or anything like that. But anyway, we'll hear the Romanza by Niccolò Paganini. And I think the Romanza is an okay piece of music. I think it's beautiful. I think if it was written by anyone other than Paganini, we probably wouldn't know about this piece in the year 2022 at all, because it's not that memorable. But what is a little bit more memorable is the next selection. The next selection is called Capriccio Diabolico, and it is a homage to Paganini. This is by the Italian composer Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco. And of course, this was written for Segovia, and it's a pretty dazzling piece of music. I think it probably would have been a very, very effective piece of music to see in person. And my notes here say that it was composed in 1935, and essentially Segovia is the one who plays on that instrument and does that sort of thing. Keep in mind, in 1935, the classical guitar as we know it in 1935 and the classical guitar as we know it now are two different items, mainly because of the material played with the strings. Remember, the nylon string is something that is a World War II and onward discovery. So in 1935, this would have been on gut strings. And I am absolutely certain that all of that sounds a lot different between the two different instruments and those sorts of things. It may sound like a subtle nuance from where you're hearing, but in any case, that's a little bit about Capriccio Diabolico. There is yet another Castelnuovo Tedesco piece entitled Spring. This is a unique piece of music. Spring is from a set of pieces called Platero and I, Platero y yo, as it's known, and it's 28 musical evocations based on the famous book by Juan R. Jimenez. Castelnuovo Tedesco brought great freshness and simplicity to this tender and universal work of art. And so what happens is, this is music that is set for narration. Now, the narration is not present on this recording, but the music is beautiful standalone, so please enjoy that piece of music. We finish up with a piece that I had never heard until I listened to this record, It's by composer Goffredo Petrassi, and it is entitled Suoni Notturni, so a nocturne, nocturnal sounds from 1959. And so this is very much in the avant-garde style where it bridges tonality and those sorts of things. So enjoy the soundscape that we hear to close out this record. Thank you so much for listening to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. As I mentioned before, Instagram is the hub or the preferred way that you get in touch with me if you'd like to reach out about the podcast. There are some other ways, though, however. So Instagram.com/Powell Guitar. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/Powell Guitar. Or if you'd like to simply send an email, that address is powellguitar@gmail.com. If you're interested in supporting the show in any way, you can go to the show's hub, which is at anchor.fm/powellguitar, and there are links in which you could do that. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy. Keep in mind that we have a catalog of back episodes that you can listen to that goes clear back to the first season, and enjoy. I love putting out this music of classical guitar for you all to listen. These have been on records that have been sitting in shelves for many years at my home, and I enjoy listening to them and telling you about them and getting together in this way. So enjoy, and here is side 2 of 4 Centuries of Italian Guitar.